which tell us something about how services have to be delivered. So first of all, we have at the bottom in blue, we have access to information as being an absolute necessity to improve people's access to water and sanitation. It's not just that people need to know that they have the right, though all that is very important, but they also have a right to know how they can access water and sanitation, what policies are in place by governments to bring water and sanitation to them, and what standards those services should be. So there's, within this principle of the access to information, there's a lot of different types of information that should be available. And perhaps most importantly, that information has to be available in either in local languages, it has to be available readily and easily so that people can actually access it. The second principle is participation. People need to be able to participate in decisions that affect their own access to water and sanitation. So that means that if there are decisions being made about the type of service that's being delivered to a particular area, or where that service is to be positioned, or yes, how much it's going to cost, communities and individuals, households need to be able to participate in those decisions so that the right decisions are made for them, that they're not having services imposed on them which are not suitable, which are not acceptable, which won't meet their needs. A third principle is sustainability. As we know, there's a large number of water points at any one time which are out of action. And often they're still being counted by global statistics because at some point they have existed. That is not acceptable under the human rights to water and sanitation. Services have to be actually working. And so sustainability is a key principle. Now, one of the most important principles of human rights is equality and non-discrimination. No one may be discriminated against for any reason. There are no grounds for discrimination, and this can include race, religion, gender, language spoken, disability. Everybody has to have access to water and sanitation regardless of who they are and regardless of where they live. And this means that also people living in detention centers, refugees, people, prisoners, all have to have access to water and sanitation. And this particular principle demands then that governments look much more closely at who does not have access to water and sanitation and why. It is no longer acceptable, as it was in the time of the MDGs, to say, okay, we've got pretty much all the way to meeting, to reaching universal access. The last few people, that's much too difficult for us. Under the human rights to water and sanitation, every individual, regardless of who they are or where they live or what they do, has to have access to water and sanitation. So this principle means that governments have to think differently about how they prioritize who is gaining access to water and sanitation. Then the final principle here on the left-hand side in red is accountability. And this is really where governments have to think again and think differently. They have to be able to show that they are doing everything in their power to reach everybody. There is no way anymore that governments can say, okay, we're going to do it, but we're not going to tell you exactly how. That would not be an accountable government. So this is really where the human rights to water and sanitation bring incredibly powerful tools to governments and to civil society, to NGOs, because there has to be this mutual accountability. There has to be this situation where governments are open about the decisions that they are making. So here we have these 5 principles, and they're pretty, as you can imagine, they are quite demanding on governments, because often they will make governments do things in a different way. And this is, as I say, as we move from political and legal commitments to the reality of delivering the services, these principles help governments and civil society to see how that can be done. And the word at the top here, however, progressive realization, is incredibly important, because this says governments have to do this work. They have to follow these principles, but they don't have to do, and it would be impossible to do everything all at once. But they do have to make a plan. They have to show us how they're going to reach these principles. So, for example, if we take the SDGs, which are in many ways a translation of the human rights to water and sanitation particularly, governments have to show that between now and 2030, they will not only reach the people who are easy to reach or the people who are the not so poor, but they also have to show through a 15-year, well now it's only 13-year time span, they have to show how they will reach everybody, how they will set their priorities, what they're going to do, how they're going to make their investments, and then they have to report on that process. And on the left-hand side of the criteria, which are the standards that have to be reached, and I'm not going to go on long about those because I don't want to use all my time up on this one slide. And they are that water and sanitation must be available, it must be accessible whoever you are. So if you have a disability, if you're a child, if you're elderly, you have to be able to reach the sanitation service easily and comfortably. So that means that often there will have to be a little bit more forethought gone into the type of service that's provided. Sorry, I've had them taken away from me. The other ones are affordability. I think affordability was not included in the MDGs, and the really important issue with affordability with that is that the MDGs often, even though we met the MDG for water, if the water was often not affordable, this demands that we have to rethink that. The services must be safe, and most importantly, particularly for sanitation, the services must be acceptable. That means they have to be thought through carefully, culturally and socially. This really puts the importance of the participatory process. Okay, sorry, the next slide. I don't think I have the, thank you. So this is just very briefly a repetition of the previous slide. The sanitation service in this case, it can look very different depending on who you are, where you live, what you need, what's available. It can be a flush system, it can be a pit latrine, but it has to fulfill those qualities, those criteria that we stated. Next slide. And similarly for water, there can be many different ways of reaching water, but they have to fulfill all of those requirements. Obviously, to have it within the home, in both the case of water and sanitation, is by far the most preferable. I think that comes onto the next slide. So this is just putting all of the different types of services together: water, sanitation. The locations, you have to be able to access services whether you're at home, you also have to access them at work, in school, in health centers, in the marketplaces. People need to be able to access services wherever they are during the day. And the provision, it doesn't matter who the provider is. It could be private sector, it could be public, local authority, NGOs. But the important point is here that those providers also need to be aware of the standards and the criteria that they need to work towards. Okay, the next slide. And all services must comply with human rights. So the important question, I think, now for governments, and maybe particularly for local governments, is how do I get there for every single person? Because this fantastic dream we have of reaching everybody, it has to be done it'll be done in the main by local authorities. And so we have been working, maybe the next slide, Al-Hassan. We have been working with these agents, with all of these different organizations. So with End Water Poverty, obviously, and I think you all know who End Water Poverty is, with UNICEF, with WaterAid, with the Rural Water Supply Network, with Wash United, and with a research institute in Australia called ISF. Some of you may be less familiar with, but I think otherwise all the names should be relatively familiar. We've been working to find a way of making these rights more accessible to the people who really have to fulfill them, who will be implementing them. And that is the people that we identified as that with having the most responsibility for delivering human rights is the local governments. And so what we're trying to do is bring in materials that can help local governments, but also regulators, also the media, also communities and other sector partners to really understand what human rights are, why they're important, and to influence the way that they work. And in order to achieve the human rights, we really have to make sure that everybody not only understands what they are and why they're important, but also what the benefits are of delivering them. And so these materials have been created in order to really inspire people. And they've also been created to persuade people. And they've been created to make people, to help people see, really understand what their influence is, how they can personally make a difference in the lives of the people that they are working with. So next slide. So this is more or less what it looks like. If you imagine your local government officer responsible for water and sanitation, they have a lot of responsibility in terms of not just understanding what the problems are. They need to be able to analyze, as you see in the first picture here, the analysis. They need to be able to analyze who has access to services, who does not have access to services, why people don't have access to services. These are all the important first questions of analysis. They then have to take that back to their office and discuss with their team how can they start to address these issues of why people don't have access and what the solutions may be. And the solutions will be different in all of the different areas where they're working. They then need to start looking at who they're going to employ to do the work, and that's the building, and then looking at how it's managed, who is managing the service, and how is it monitored. So this is very much the very typical planning cycle that I think we're all familiar with. But at each point in this cycle, we need to be bringing in the idea of human rights. So it's about bringing in the ideas of access to information, making sure that the information from the analysis is available to people. In the planning process, we need to make sure that the right communities are being prioritized and that the rights conditions are being put in place so that services can be provided at an affordable rate. At the building process, we need to be making sure that the services are safe that are being delivered, that the service providers are accountable to the government and to the local government as they're doing the building work, so that they are providing good services. For running the services, we need to make sure that the people who are running the services understand the sustainability, what needs to be done. And so the first step that we have in our materials is exactly that. It's about the journey, what the role is of the local government, and how we move through each of these phases using the human rights to inform how people work. There is also, within the materials, there's this thing, the manual, which is on the left-hand side, and I'm not sure how many people have actually managed to print out these materials, but this talks you through the journey. And then the next slide. And the manual also, what the manual also does, sorry, if you can go back one slide, it also helps to explain the relationships that again, we look at the local government here, and he has various different roles, or she has various different roles, whether it's the building, the construction, it's the participatory processes and the discussion, it's the kind of the political side of it, where you get to go and open a toilet, or you get to open a water point, or whatever. You're working with government, you're working with NGOs, you're working with perhaps funders such as the World Bank. So it's the government official has to has to collaborate and negotiate with all of these different actors in order to fulfill their role. And this brings us to the what I think is the last slide, which is the actual pocket guide. Now, this is a very small, very compact description of what local governments need to do, the local government officer, what he needs to do in order to both understand the rights and to bring the rights to fruition. I don't have the time, unfortunately, to talk through this in any great detail, but I hope that those of you who have had a chance to look at this, maybe you have questions that Al-Hassan and I can help to answer. But I think that's the end of my presentation right now. Ah, yes, there's a poster which actually tells you really about the benefits to, when it says you here, it's talking about the local government official. And it's looking at him or her becoming the hero, becoming the person who really feels that they've achieved something. They've achieved this goal of delivering services to everybody. Yes, so thank you very much. I'm sorry that's very fast presentation of something that is really quite complex. But yes, I hope we can answer some of your questions.
Thank you so much, Virginia. So now we would like to have a conversation with all of you. And then if you have questions, especially I would like to encourage colleagues who have done some work around kind of implementation of human rights, water and sanitation in their countries. I know a couple of countries that have constitutions or policies that recognize human rights to water, but governments haven't really prioritized implementation. So I'll be happy to hear you kind of share your experience, how this looked like in your country. So if you raise your hand, then we can unmute you and then you could speak directly, or you can type in the chat box and say you want to ask a question or contribute. Then that makes it easier. Okay, we could see Barry Jackson.
Yes,
Hey, I've just unmuted Barry. So Barry, you have the floor. Go ahead and ask your question.
Right, my name is Barry Jackson. I'm a consultant now, but I used to be with and I'm still on the steering committee of the Water Supply and Sanitation Collaborative Council, who's also been working with you on this. But I'm based in South Africa, and what I see in South Africa is there's been a very heavy commitment of the government to realize these human rights because it's built into our constitution. But the actual achievement of that is something else. Too often there's an emphasis on building infrastructure, but no emphasis on how it's going to be operated and maintained. And there are serious issues there. So I'm wondering if you, in your deliberations so far, can have any words of wisdom to say to countries that are, including countries like India, who also have a lot of money to throw at the problem, how we can ensure that the end result is not just unused hardware or semi-functioning hardware, but a service that goes on delivering for a generation, in fact, forever. Any comments on that, please?
Okay, can we take a couple of comments and then we come back to address them? Yeah, who else?
And while others are raising their hands or adding their comments or question to Barry's question, just to point out our upcoming webinars next week and the week after are on your, you should see them on your screen here with the link to register. And Barry, actually one of our points that we'll be discussing on our webinar next week, which is focused on financing an end to the water and sanitation crisis, we'll have speakers that'll talk about just that, kind of the importance to focus on the full life cycle of a project and the sustainability aspect of life cycle costing in particular. So make sure to register and tune into that conversation as well.
Okay, probably I would just give a go to Barry's question. So Barry, for instance, I am a bit conversant with South Africa water rights. I remember when Johannesburg water municipality was taken to court to address the issue of human rights to water and sanitation. The Anti-Privatization Forum won a court battle, but the municipality went back to court and got the court to turn down the earlier ruling. So we can see, even although there's a bit of policy alignment with human rights in South Africa, but when it comes to implementation, it's a challenge. And I think it's not just only South Africa, as it comes across. Ghana has a policy on human rights. It's only on policy, not in constitution. Uganda has the in their constitution. Tanzania is about to rewrite their constitution and put it in. There's a bit of lobby for that. Burkina Faso has a draft constitution which recognizes human rights to water. But the only way that could be, we could kind of have sustainable human rights implementation is when we have more of civil society users calling for the government to respect the commitments that they've made to their citizens, whether at international forum commitment or local constitutional or policy commitment. And things like this, sharing information and also building the pressure in country during elections, getting the politicians to sign pledges and stuff like that all come to help in consolidating what we're trying to do. So for me, it's about mobilizing and keeping the pressure. That's the only way we can achieve this. But if we do one webinar and we go and sleep, or when we do a workshop on this and go and sleep, it will not happen. Barry,
Yes, thank you very much, Hassan. It's been, you're quite right. These things are about keeping on the pressure, but my experience here in South Africa is the pressure is often unreasonable, and it actually needs a much better cooperation between civil rights organizations who are demanding human rights and hard-pressed local authority personnel who've never actually understood this language and still need to come to terms with it and start having a, let's say, reach some kind of agreement on a long-term plan to realize these rights in an affordable manner. Some years ago, I coined a phrase in South Africa where you got the limited user charges or user payments going to the municipality, and the municipality being dependent on, to a certain extent, on government grants, intergovernmental transfers, and those are limited as well. And it's the municipality that is forced to deal with what I call the affordability crunch. Not enough money from users, not enough money from government. And what is the answer? The answer is to negotiate and agree with community representatives to the best of your ability, something that everybody can agree with. You know, a basic, the best that we can do immediately, and that what we are progressively working towards. And unless people are talking to each other, and it's an informed conversation, not just shouting and throwing rocks, we're not going to reach an agreement on this.
So Barry, can I push you a bit on this angle of being reasonable? How do you think, how do you see us mobilizing, engaging? What kind of method? How?
It's two things. It's people finding each other. Politicians, especially at election time, like to make promises, and that's before they've actually found out how much those promises cost. And they actually should be promised. How would I put it? The promise should be one of empowering people to work together to solve their problem, not the promise of Father Christmas delivering goodies to people, to a grateful, passive public. It doesn't work. There aren't enough resources to go around, and in fact, failed promises means there isn't much goodwill to go around either. But if actually we could get to the point of empowering people to participate in a process, then I think we can start coming towards solving a problem together.
Thank you, Barry. That's really helpful, and thanks for your suggestions. Any other participants on the call want to contribute? You can raise your hand, and then we would unmute you. Yeah.
I have two short questions. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
I have two short questions. The first one is about local ownership. This is one of our major challenges in Africa. And most often when I hear about it, it is subdued under the principle of participation. So I would like some clarification in your principle. How far have you covered this issue of local ownership? Because in many projects, they involve people, and it is called participation, but the ownership is the most problematic area. And my second question is on, my second question is about human rights and constitutions and policies.
Yeah.
The major challenge in Africa is not about not having policies or constitutions. If you read many African policies and constitutions, you may think it's a wonderland, it's heaven. They have very good policies, very good constitutions.
Right.
But the problem is enforcing these constitutions and policies. We should go beyond the writing of constitutions and the policies. What is your opinion on this?
Okay. So thank you. Yeah, which country are you joining us from?
I'm calling from Togo, but I'm Tanzanian.
Oh, okay. All right. So you are Pan-Africanist. That's fantastic.
Yes.
So the question of participation, I think we need to unpack the question of participation. So for me, it is the responsibility of government to provide services to its citizens. That is the social contract that we have with government. That's why we have government. Now, in that understanding, if the services are not provided for citizens, it's the government that you could hold accountable. Now, in that case, participation of citizens should be at the level when we say in the human rights principles of participation, participation should be free, without costs. There should be information that would allow you to do a meaningful participation. So if I invite you to be on the community water management system, and I expect you to come and pay for that management role, it's no participation. If I invite you to come and participate in community management, and I expect to now transfer all the responsibility of the investment for that system to you because it's community participation, then it's not participation. It's transfer of responsibilities from government to citizens, which I would not classify as participation. So there are a lot of instances where NGOs in particular are very quick to go and join schemes where they say community participation because they will give the NGO the mandate to run the system and then use it to raise funds. That is no participation. That is transfer of government responsibilities to the NGOs. The way we address participation is you are there as an active citizen, as a user of that system, and you contribute as in terms of how the system should be run. That is participation. And when you contribute, your voice is heard and the decision reflects your voice. If these things do not exist or are not implemented, then it's not participation. So yeah, have I addressed your first question?
No, I think you have addressed my question partly, but I want participation to be extended to local ownership of the system. If, for example, they participate in everything, but then a foreign company comes and manages the system, I think there is something missing there.
Yes. So
how can the local community also manage the system?
So that's why I'm saying that governments should be the owner of the system. Now, if you allow government to shirk its responsibility and shift the ownership to the community, it becomes difficult for the community to go back to government and say, government, you have to invest in these systems. So what we need to do as activists, as community members, as users, is that first and foremost is the responsibility of government to make sure that the system, the infrastructure, ownership is in the hands of government.
I get you now.
Then you can bring other people with management expertise to help deliver the system. And community should have a voice.
Now I understand you.
Yeah. So to your second question, and in terms of the policy and constitution, you're right. In a lot of the countries, we have beautiful constitutions and policies, but they are not being implemented. That's why we're having this discussion. And going back to the contribution of Barry, as how we can have meaningful engagement and meaningful participation that we just discussed, that makes it necessary and important, and for us to make sure that we hold our governments accountable, not just accountable on paper, but accountable to deliver the services that they promise to deliver. So please, anybody on the call who want to contribute to these particular discussions, please raise your hand and then we would open up for you. Thank you, Yaya.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yaya. And while we wait for others to raise their hand, I know that I keep pointing to our upcoming webinars, but our conversation next week will also include a couple of points on handing over ownership of a project to a community, and in terms of implementation and building of new infrastructure, we'll also be discussing a little bit the role that community ownership of a project plays into that in terms of pitching in not only for the implementation and the building aspect, but also the funding and the follow-up and the maintenance and all of that. So if you're interested in learning more and being part of that conversation, feel free to register and tune in next week as well.
Good. So are we having any more questions?
I don't see other hands raised or additional questions in the chat box, but we can give it another couple of minutes. Oh, Barry raised, I see that you raised your hand again, so I'll send you an unmute request. You're unmuted on our end.
I'm so sorry, I didn't realize that. I was holding back. I don't want to dominate, so you feel free not to recognize me. But I was going to say about Al-Hassan Adam, I was going to ask him which planet he lives on, that he thinks the government has all the expertise necessary to run schemes, let's call it, we were being a bit woolly here because Yahya did not describe whether he was talking about urban or rural or something in between. By implication, I inferred that he was talking about rural because of ownership and running things. There aren't many people who think they can hand over an urban scheme to a community. But then Al-Hassan was suggesting that in fact that government should be able to provide the management expertise in rural areas. Now, the reason we've got to where we are, imperfect though it is because government is not, many developing country governments haven't got the expertise or the reach or the resources to be able to operate and maintain schemes in rural areas far from the nearest tar road. And so 30, 40 years ago, it was, community participation and ownership and management was invented. Now, but we also know that communities have fatigue when it comes to running their own schemes. So the answer is not the answer, wrong phrase, but we need to consider how we keep that dialogue open, how we how the centralized resources, with the government with more money than the local community, how that is best used to ensure the community gets the service they deserve. But also when it's being sold to them, it's actually a matter of saying, this is what the government can do, this is what the government could provide, and what can you provide? And, you know, so not saying, you know, we're delegating is a nice word. Abdicating is more likely. But how do we get this right accommodation between those who have the big resources but only occasionally available at central government locations, and the people on the ground who need a service that goes on running and suits them? And there should be this dialogue about, you know, it'll have to be a limited system until we have more money to build a bigger system. And the only way, you know, the most likely way of keeping it going is if community gets involved in operating and maintaining. So those are all the sort of the dialogues that need to go on. And I don't think there's a simple answer, but it's a matter of people being open. Again, my first point, to empowering people in communities to solve their own problems with the kind of resources, inputs, advice, technical expertise that can be provided by those who have it in government. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Barry. I didn't mean to say government provide management expertise, but I said government is the responsibility of government to provide those services. And you should hold government accountable if you don't have the services. Now, government can decide to enter in partnership with other organizations and all these things to provide their services. But the evidence we are having at the moment is that is a big challenge in the rural areas, even where NGOs are working. NGOs are not able to meet the demands of the people. And indeed, some of them, when they install the infrastructure after 5 years, it's crumbled and nobody goes back to maintain them. So there is a big role of government in this stage, and it is the responsibility of government through social contract to make sure that we get this. Pressy Wilson, are you ready to contribute? I've seen your hands up. I've unmuted you.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes. Can you state where you're calling from or where you're contributing from?
Yes. I'm calling from London. And I thought it was really interesting what Barry said. I was trying to understand or discern if he was referring to governments within
Pressy, we've lost you. Did anybody hear what Pressy said?
No, I did not. She went off after about 5 words.
Yeah, when she mentioned your name and then it disappeared. Hello, Pressy, are you there?
Oh.
Okay, let's see, Justine, maybe Pressy will come back. Justine, you have the floor. Sorry, Pressy, we lost you. Can anybody hear?
Nothing's happening.
No, and I think Justine might have gone offline as well. And it looks like Parisi has also gone offline.
Offline, okay, all right. So we have 4 more minutes to wrap up. Babatopi Babalobi, do you want to say something?
I see that Yaya has his hand raised. I'm not sure if that's from earlier, but
probably from earlier.
Wow. Yaya, I'll mute you in case you're hoping to contribute to the conversation we have going right now.
No, not at all. I just wanted to say I lost her.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All right. Babatopi, can you hear us? I think some people are having problems connecting. It's a shame. We would love to hear other people's observation. Edu, do you want to say something? I guess you're from Nigeria, is that right? What's the situation in Nigeria?
I'm from Nigeria, but I'm actually studying in University of Geneva. I'm speaking from Switzerland.
Fantastic. So do you want to say something on the discussion?
I actually was thinking that I could just listen to it because I wasn't so much involved in discussion, but I'm actually a researcher on water with the University of Geneva. I can hear noise.
Sorry, my fault.
So
go ahead.
It has been an interesting discussion, especially from Bali, and his contribution and your remark has been quite outstanding. I never planned to make comment. I just wanted to listen to and enrich my knowledge in the area.
Fantastic. So I'm interested in Nigeria because recently there's a discussion in Lagos about Lagos water, and I'll be interested to hear from Babatopi Babalobi. If I unmute you, will you be able to tell us something about what's happening in Lagos?
Yes, I'm just joining in. My name is Babatopi Babalobi. Yes, I can provide some information, but I also like to know who is requesting the information.
My name is Al-Hassan Adam, and I'm coordinator of End Water Poverty. And then I've been following the discussion of the water rights in Nigeria, Lagos, the Lagos Water Services. And I know the civil society there are doing some bit of noise around that, and I would like you to share with the participants what is going on in Lagos.
Okay, that is fine. I'm not really directly working on that issue now, but I also follow up some activities that is taking place in Lagos. Of course, Nigeria is beyond Lagos. Of course, Lagos is the commercial center of Nigeria and the most populous city. And Nigeria is such a big country. So there are so many other things happening on around.
So what's happening around your area?
I'm not really working directly on the issue you mentioned.
So is there anything happening in your area you want to share?
Yeah. Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, am I in the webinar already? Has it started?
Yes, yes. It's almost finishing. We are 5 minutes to wrap
I
up.
just thought it was starting.
No, sorry if the timing kind of mixed up from your end, but we are almost wrapping up, so you might be the last person to contribute.
Okay, sorry, the issues remain the same. Of course, the percentage of access is still poor, just around half of the population have access to safe drinking water, basically around the country. And of course, because of increasing urbanization, the challenge of access to safe drinking water is more pronounced in urban centers all over the country. The problems are still there, the challenges are still there. Development partners are still supporting, trying to reform the system, but all these have not succeeded in delivering results. The sector is still not accorded the priority it should have in terms of political priority, in terms of funding. We also have challenges in terms of even the funds, the mega funds that are budgeted for the sectors. There are issues of prudency, there are issues of transparency, and there are issues of accountability. So the water sector still remains, the water and sanitation sector still remains marginalized. And the issues of right to water is not really pronounced in public discourse. People, water, and sanitation seems not to be topics that appeal, to political leaders and public officials. So basically, the problems still remain the same. The issues still remain the same. The utilities that are providing water services, the states, Nigeria as a federal structure, is the state agencies that have the responsibility of providing water services, and we have a state water corporation. We have the water corporation in each of the 36 states in the country. You can hardly find any of the water agencies providing services efficiently. In terms of coverage, their coverage is still very poor, specifically concerning the Lagos water you mentioned. We have the Lagos Water Corporation that is providing service to less than 20% of the populace. So these are good challenges, and one area, I've been interested in the past few years is to address the needs of blighted communities, communities that are even not under the former public water scheme, because if you have the water utility that is just providing service for 20%, what happens to the rest 80% in urban slums, in blighted areas, getting water from small-scale vendors whose services are not regulated, whose quality nobody is asking questions, whose pricing nobody is regulating. So the challenges remains very enormous, not because the resources are not there, but basically because the sector is not prioritized, and basically because there are huge issues about accountability and transparency. Energy is also a huge problem. Of course, Nigeria, we have the energy and water linkage. Nigeria has very huge challenges in public energy supply. So the water utilities, for instance, one of the reasons why they can't operate is that public energy supply is almost nil. almost zero in Nigeria. So these are issues. The civil society is trying to raise the flag across Nigeria, but there are also challenges there. Very few civil society organizations that are working in the sector, but we just try to do the best we could do.
Thank you so much, Baba Tupi. Percy Wilson, and I think you're back. You'll be the last contributor, and then we would wrap up this presentation. So I'm going to unmute you, Percy, and then you have the final words.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Sorry, we lost you.
No, it's absolutely fine. I was just going to make one simple point, which was I believe that governments, no matter where they are, have the ability and should exercise their actual roles in the power that they have to ensure that these rights are given to people and that they're enjoying their rights. So I just disagree with the point that some of these governments are incapable of doing that. It feeds into a different rhetoric, which is something that I'm going to speak specifically on Africa, has been fighting since decolonization, inverted commas. And so I think it's just time to start revisiting also how we approach peoples and what we say people are capable and not capable of. They've been voted in, and so they should be able to crack on with the jobs that they've been assigned to. And that's my only thoughts. Really enjoyed the webinar, so thanks for that.
Thank you, Percy. That's the end of our interaction. And thank you all for joining. That's really interesting interaction and different opinions. And for us, this is the beauty, is to present this platform for us to interact with different opinions. You could disagree, but you respect the opinions of others. And through this dialogue, we might be able to arrive at a solution to this water and sanitation crisis. There'll be a couple of webinars that will be rolling out for this Water Action Month, and then I'll hand over to Alex to tell you what we have next. And thank you all for the time.
Sure, so thank you, Al-Hassan. And just to confirm, can you all see on your screen the information on our upcoming webinars?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, so next week, our next session, oops, sorry. Okay, so next week our next session will be on finance. So finance is often kind of seen as a scary word, and a lot of people don't know how to approach the topic. So we'll have 6 great speakers from giving input from the private sector, from civil society, other sorts of financial mechanisms that are hybrid models, and looking at successes and challenges in this topic of financing the end to the water and sanitation crisis. And on our last week of Water Action Month, the Tuesday, March 28th, we'll be wrapping up Water Action Month by looking into the future and discussing how children and youth can be involved in WASH initiatives, and the importance of including the next generation in the planning of this end to the water and sanitation crisis in SDG 6. So we'll have some great insights from organizations working on the ground and involving youth in their initiatives, as well as WaterAid UK as well will be joining us for that webinar. So you'll have you have the links to sign up for those webinars on your screen here, but you'll also receive those via email along with the recording of this session today. So that's it on my end, Al-Hassan. I just want to say thank you for everybody who tuned in from lots of different parts of the world today to join this conversation and pitch in your comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you all. This recording would be on the End Water Poverty website, and if you want to come back to it, you could always come back and listen to this particular recordings and other recordings that we have done for this series of webinars. And thank you all, and watch the space. We'll be rolling out more interactive products. Thank you. Bye.